everybody, and welcome to AJU B'Yachad Together. We are thrilled to have you with us this afternoon. We're going to get started in just a minute as I see our participant numbers are growing, and we are so thrilled to have so many of you registered with us today. We have over 500 participants registered from all over the United States, Canada, and our favorite group in South Africa who'd like to join us on a regular basis. So we're thrilled to have you all joining us this morning or this afternoon, this evening, whatever the time zone you're in, you find yourself sitting in today. So we are thrilled to have you here with us. You are turned into No Atheists in the Trenches. AJU's Rabbi Adam Greenwald will be in conversation with Mike Van Wyck, discussing Mike's journey of spirituality as a pilot serving in the U.S. Marine Corps, all the way to his conversion to Judaism. My name is Deb Engel-Collin, and I am the Relationship Manager for the Miller Introduction to Judaism program here at AJU. American Jewish University advances and elevates the Jewish journey of individuals, organizations in our community through excellence in scholarship, teaching, engaged conversation, and outreach. This B'Yachad platform was developed to deliver online learning that captures the insights of our faculty and friends and convenes our diverse and inclusive community to advance ideas, dialogue, and debate. I am honored to introduce AJU's own Rabbi Adam Greenwald. Rabbi Adam is Vice President for Jewish Engagement at AJU, where he directs the Moss Center for Jewish Journeys and the Miller Introduction to Judaism program. Yes, he's my boss. He also serves as lecturer in rabbinics at the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies and is the recipient of the Covenant Foundation's Pomegranate Prize in Jewish Education. Mike Van Wyck began a 15-year career in the U.S. Marine Corps starting in the summer of 2001. Mike served primarily as a KC-130 pilot, including a tour of duty as a flight demonstration pilot on the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. His last duty station was at Defense Innovation Unit in Mountain View, California, where he explored innovative counter-drone technology for rapid delivery to combat and deployed units. Try saying that 7 times fast. Following his service, Mike attended the Stanford Graduate School of Business, where he graduated with an MS in management. Currently, Mike is executive officer at Caruso, acting as a chief strategic advisor to the CEO, as well as leading digital and innovation initiatives at the company. Mike, thank you so much to your service to our country. I really, on a personal level, appreciate it. So today you can put your questions in the Q&A function, and Rabbi Adam will get to them as they go in this discussion. And I look forward to seeing you at the end of this, what's going to be an amazing conversation, I know. So I'll see you on the back end, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Deb, for the introductions. And Mike, it is really a pleasure to get to be in conversation with a friend, a former student, and now as AJU's newest board member, one of my bosses. So you have served really all of the functions that there is to serve in my life. I am really, really grateful to get to have this conversation, and grateful to see, I was scrolling through a bit, all of the names of the participants, and I see many other AJU board members have joined us, many alums of the Introduction to Judaism program, some of our LA Jewish Federation leadership I saw, as well as many other friends. So welcome to everybody joining us from all around the country and all around the world for this conversation, and thank you so much, Mike, for your time.
Yeah, Adam, I'm really glad to be here, and Deb, thanks for a great introduction, and excited to be talking with you all today.
So you have just one of the most fascinating personal stories of anybody that I've ever met. I know that, you're just living it, so it's just your story. But for the rest of us, you have had adventures and experiences and gone on journeys, both up in the air and deep in your soul that I think the rest of us can really learn from. So I have a few questions that I want to ask you as you share your story and your reflections with us. And I also want to repeat the invitation to all of our participants, 262 of you right now, and growing, to add your questions to the Q&A. I may not be able to get to all of them, but I'll try to weave in as many as I can over the course of our 45 minutes together. So Mike, I'd really like to start by talking about your beginnings, about your early life. Can you tell us a little bit about where you were raised and about the values that were important in your family growing up and how they shaped you into the man you are today?
Of course. That's a great question. And, I think that it's a great to point out that it's hard to know what your experience looks like on the outside. And I think growing up and getting to where I am now, there's been some really interesting threads that run through everything. My grandfather served in World War II at the Battle of the Bulge. He was a Silver Star recipient. My father was in the Navy on submarines during the Vietnam era. Met my mom in the Philippines while he was on shore leave there, and eventually she came over. So I came from a military family. I come from an immigrant family. And my mom grew up Catholic, and my dad grew up Protestant. We moved around a bunch when I was a kid, and we ended up putting roots down in the Midwest, in the Chicago area. So grew up in a very, very normal suburban upbringing, going to Protestant upbringing, just going to church every Sunday, kind of doing the thing. And it's really interesting. When I was in second grade, it was the same year my parents kind of reaffirmed their faith, their Protestant faith. It was also the first year that they took me to an air show. And that was the year that I decided I wanted to become a pilot. It's very strange at that age, but you know how it is. Everyone wants to be an astronaut or a firefighter at that age.
Or a rabbi.
I went ahead, or a rabbi. I went ahead and followed through with it. Yeah, no, I think that was probably third. And then that was also the year I started playing piano. So I think there were really three very common threads through my life that started at that really critical time. And I think the values were all along those lines. We had a very normal upbringing, and I went to church, and I think it was something that I inherited. I think there's a lot of people in faith traditions that inherit their faith, and maybe it takes a long time to own it and wrestle with it. Yeah. And jumping ahead a little bit, we say this is no atheist in the trenches, and I think more accurately, there is nothing taken for granted in the trenches. And we weren't literally in trenches, but the idea is you get in, as life progresses, and you have these really defining moments and defining things that happen to you, and it forces you to take stock of the decisions and the commitments you've made and what your life is all about. And that upbringing gave me a chance to have a really strong foundation to make a choice that brought me to Judaism eventually.
So there are a lot of threads that started early that we'll follow. One thread that took you eventually to flight school in the U.S. Marine Corps, another thread that took you eventually to AJU's Miller Introduction to Judaism program, and maybe we'll even get some music in at some point. I'd like to hear a little bit more about the fact that you come from a military family, right? That your grandfather was in the Battle of the Bulge, that your father was in submarines, and I'm wondering what they told you about their service and about the value of service that really stuck with you.
Yeah, and if any of you have had the opportunity to speak with anybody who served in what they call the greatest generation in World War II, you'll know that what they talk about is that they don't talk about it. And it's something that everyone did, and it's something that happened to them, it's something they did, and they were glad to come home and put it behind them. And I think I can really understand and appreciate and respect that. I never heard any stories about it from my grandfather, and I very much looked up to him, and he was very much a model for my service. I knew from newspaper articles, I'd seen his medal, he had brought some things back, and it was always just very mysterious, and just had this very strong draw to me. My dad, I heard more about. He was in submarines, which is something I knew that I just never, ever wanted to do, was get into a metal tube and go hundreds of feet under the water for a month or 2 months at a time, and never see the sun for several months at a time. That didn't sound super great to me, but, good on him. So when I joined the military, I went the other direction, went up into the air. Metal tube as well, but only for a few hours and lots of sun. So.
So you graduated high school, and your military service came after college. Is that right?
That's right. So the Marine Corps has a program. A lot of people think that only the Air Force flies. The Air Force has the biggest Air Force in the world. The Navy has the second biggest Air Force in the world, and the Army has the third biggest in the world. The Marine Corps, we have the seventh biggest, so we're behind a few other people, but not bad for being the smallest military service. So they had a program to recruit pilots that was called the Guaranteed Flight Contract Program, and you would, at some point in college, you take a kind of a fit exam, and then a physiological exam, and then you'd go to boot camp, which was called Officer Candidate School. And if you made it through all of that, they would give you a shot at flight school. They didn't guarantee you to make it through, but they'd give you a shot. I had never been in a plane before. I just knew I wanted to fly. I hadn't flown at all, so I just
you had never been in a plane,
it.
Like you had never flown from Chicago to California.
Maybe when I was very young, and I can't remember, but no, I had never flown commercial.
Wow.
So it was a little bit of going out on a limb. It was interesting that we flew through some turbulence on the way to boot camp when I was on my way there on a flight contract, and I was getting nauseous in the plane, and I was like, this is not going to work out. But I did go in summer of 2001 to my first session of OCS, which was pre-September 11th. So I was one of the last classes to go through before September 11th. And obviously things changed drastically after that. I still had 2 years of college to finish, 2 years of undergrad, but everything changed, like it became real. We hadn't been in a war since a big one since 1991. So it'd been a while. And then before that was Vietnam. So we were rusty, and there was just a new attitude that happened after September 11th that changed everything.
Can you talk more about that, about how it impacted you? I feel like we are right now living through another one of those periods when it feels like everything is changing. And I think for a lot of us, it's calling memories back to 9/11 when it felt like everything is changing. How did that affect your thinking about going into the service?
I think because of my upbringing and because of knowing that war was a thing and that people I knew had gone, I had a little bit of a different attitude than maybe most people. I don't want to make any assumptions about that, but it was one of those things that you knew that it could happen, but it was still entirely unreal that it was happening. Mm-hmm. It's still, thinking back, it's just the most surreal thing. Everyone knows where they were at. I know where I was at. I was in a creativity seminar in undergrad, and everyone looked over at me like, what does this mean for you? Because everyone assumed that I was going to get. Now, I wasn't active duty or anything. It didn't mean that, but it was just, there was a reality that sets in at that moment, that this is for real. Mm-hmm. Like, things are going to happen. This is what you signed up to do. And it's not about the GI Bill anymore. It's not about getting your wings. It's about, no kidding, defending the country. And I mean, things were different, and it played out over the next 2 decades in interesting ways, as all things do, because war is messy business. International politics and national security is really messy, and it's hard. And yeah, you're not going to do everything right, and some things were done wrong. But at the time, it was about defending the country and defending people that were never supposed to experience this.
Yeah. So you made it through your last 2 years at Trinity Christian College.
Yes.
Go Trolls. With a degree in theology and in music. And then we'll come back to the theology in a bit, but just continuing on the thread of your service, you went into the Marine Corps, went to flight school, got your wings, served tours of duty overseas and also in all sorts of logistics roles internationally. And you also flew with the Blue Angels, which is pretty freaking cool. Tell us about your service. Tell us about that experience.
Sure. I will save that part for last, because that's the one that everyone wants to hear about. There's a lot of things that people don't know about service. And what I loved about the Blue Angels is that it's something that people can see. It's something that people can share in, they can experience, they can go and appreciate. Going back to the start, so after I graduated college, undergrad, I commissioned into the Marine Corps that same day. I put my dress blues on, I put my right hand up, took the oath. And then I went to what was called the basic school, which is basically a provisional rifle platoon commander school, because the Marine Corps had this motto, which was every Marine's a rifleman. So you train to be an infantry officer first. You don't go through the full thing, but you train that first, and then you go get to do your other thing. So they think that all that other stuff is just messing around, and really what it means to be a Marine is to be an infantry. So you do that for 6 months, and then after that you go to flight school. Flight school is a challenge. Now, I studied really hard. I did well academically. I did well in the plane, but I got really sick. And it's one of those things where if you don't get it, you don't get it. It's like migraines. If you don't get migraines, you don't understand what a migraine is. I got really sick. I got sick every time I flew the plane. So it was something that was really hard because it was something I had no control over. I had to just tough it out every time. Later, I learned that Chuck Yeager, who some of you may know, he was the first person to break the sound barrier. He was in The Right Stuff, all that. He got very sick in airplanes as well. He eventually got over it. I got over it less. And that's one of the reasons I did not go to jets. I had the scores to fly jets, but I was not going to sign up for a life of eternal nausea. So I went to C-130s, which was actually a little bit, it wasn't harder to get from a score perspective, but it was just, there were just fewer spots. We only had a couple dozen spots, whereas we had a couple hundred spots a year for jets. So I got lucky, I did well, and they gave it to me, which was kind of my dream. When I talked about second grade, there's a picture of me in front of a C-130 in second grade, and that's what I wanted to fly, and I ended up getting to fly it. So,
for those of us who are less familiar, can you describe the aircraft?
Yeah, so it's a large 4-engine tactical cargo aircraft. It's got the props, and it's got high wings. You know, it looks really big. It's about the size of a 737. The back opens up so you can put stuff in it. Our variant would actually refuel other airplanes in the air. So like a jet could come up behind us, we would trail a hose, they'd plug into the hose and get gas. We could also refuel helicopters, which was really crazy. You'd never think that's a thing. Which was great about the plane. It could fly slow enough that it could fly at helicopter speeds, and the helicopter could refuel it midair. Really cool thing. You can Google it. It's really interesting to look at. So
totally. I remember that scene with the credits in Dr. Strangelove. With a refueling scene. Right. So you got your wings in C-130s and you flew in Afghanistan, and then take us to the Blue Angels. Tell us about the Blue Angels, what they are, what their mission is, and a little bit of what that experience is like.
Of course. So I was in Okinawa for 4 years flying C-130s. I deployed to Afghanistan flying. And then when I came back, I actually did a ground tour with a reconnaissance unit where I embedded with that unit, and I would go around with them. And if they had to call in airstrikes or medevacs, I was the one that would do that. So it was a really interesting tour. It's something that the Marine Corps does with just their normal pilots. But during that, right before I deployed to Afghanistan, a buddy of mine called me up and said, hey, I'm applying to go to the Blue Angels. Like, why don't you apply? This is like a week before I was going to Afghanistan. They're like, we're going to be in Corpus Christi, Texas. Why don't you fly out? So I flew out, met the team. I applied. I was like, well, we'll see what happens. Then I deployed to Afghanistan with this recon unit. And while I was there, I had to go through the rest of the interview process. So I'm on Afghanistan time. They're in Florida time. I was like calling them in the middle of the night. It was very interesting. And then I remember I was in southern Helmand province, Afghanistan. We were on a mission outside the wire, and I had a time slot to call in to see if I had made it or not. And I was calling on a satellite phone in a blacked out armored vehicle. And that's when I learned that I had made it. So it was a really cool story. But I remember hanging up, and then like they're like, congratulations. And I hung up, and it was just like dark and silent. And it just seemed like it was this very unreal thing. But, I made it back from Afghanistan and went to the Blue Angels. And the Blue Angels is really interesting. A couple important things is it is an active duty military squadron. It's not a business. It is an actual military unit. It is comprised of all active duty military members. There is no special flight test to go to it. It's all based on hitting certain wickets in the training. And the important thing about that is when we demonstrate at air shows, it is things that most aviators within the Navy and the Marine Corps are trained to be able to do to some degree. Now, when you do join the team, you go through over 100 training flights to make sure that you practice those specific maneuvers at, especially the jets. They're 18 inches apart from each other, 200 feet off the ground, going 400 miles an hour. And et cetera. So there's a lot of precision required, a lot of practice, especially for those guys. And then on the C-130 side, it's very similar. We flew a very large aircraft and some very interesting maneuvers that people would not realize that plane could do. And it was great to be able to go around the country and demonstrate. We would do about 35 different air shows a year. Our plane would take everyone from the team everywhere. We would take all the parts, everything but engines and flight control surfaces. And it was just it was a really interesting, really unique tour.
Mm. And while you were flying in this really elite, really amazing unit, there was also some personal transformation going on. So you had come from a Christian home, mother Filipino Catholic, father American Protestant. You went to a Protestant college, got a degree in Christian theology, and here you are in the Marine Corps flying on planes and starting to ask some questions. Mm-hmm. Tell us about where that began.
I think that if I was mature and introspecting throughout all of my adult years, I would have noticed the cracks and I would have noticed the doubts. I would have remembered all of the times that I questioned things and never got answers that made sense. I would have remembered the community turning its back on me or not really being supportive in the way that was accepting of, where I was and who I was and et cetera. Mm-hmm. Afghanistan, the second time, the combat deployments for a lot of people, there are people that have really intense experiences, but for a lot of people, it's 90% boredom and misery. And, the other parts get kind of exciting and intense. But during that 90%, southern Afghanistan, it's high desert. It's really bleak territory. And everyone thinks that the moon landing was faked in southern Afghanistan or northern Pakistan. So it's that bleak of a landscape. Maybe not everyone thinks that, but the people that think that think it was there. And
you're not about to reveal state secrets, are you?
No, I swear. And so you have a lot of time. It's about 130 degrees during the day. You don't have any shade. You're wearing 100 pounds of gear and armor and carrying stuff around, and you're just miserable. You're eating these pre-packaged, over-preserved meals that come in a bag with rat poison in it. And you have the same 3 meals you eat over and over again for weeks. There's sand in the food every time you eat because there's this thing called 100 days of wind there, which blows sand on everything and in everything. You don't shower for weeks at a time. And you cannot escape or distract with anything. I read books and talked with people and we did some missions, but a lot of it was just moving from one place to another and just being there. And you just have so much time to think. And everything starts to come to light. Everything starts to come into focus. You have some time to do some introspection, especially when you've been chasing that career and you've been working hard and doing all that. It's a time to really reflect. When I came back from Afghanistan and jumped into the Blue Angels, and you get back into that rat race and that competition, it's very jarring. And you become, or at least I experienced, that you are unable to jump back into it unquestioningly. I questioned the Blue Angels. I mean, it was a great tour, but there were things that were not done well there. There were some really bad parts about it. I mean, just a couple years after I left, we lost one of our friends, a pilot, in a tragic accident. And a lot of that was built, kind of resulted from a culture that was not great at the time. So that's kind of the ugly side of it. And then in my religion, there was a lot of questions that I did not have answered. And I understand there's always a faith element, but it wasn't that. It was the inability to accept the fact of questioning. And I remembered with my religious studies, and we evaluated and studied a lot of religions. Obviously, in a Protestant tradition, you study the Bible, quote unquote. So I had a lot of moments where I just found myself rereading the first 5 books over and over again, and finding a lot of truth in that, and really resonating with me and all of the characters and the patriarchs and the matriarchs, and all of it making sense and all of it resonating and being the one thing that grounded. And anytime I kind of went outside of that, it started to get a little convoluted, and I didn't really have a lot of guidance. There's a lot of self-help books. There's a lot of kind of, popcorn literature of people trying to walk you through the scriptures that just does not get it. And I was really seeking this kind of deeper understanding. So I started questioning all of it. And I started making decisions to reevaluate. And I over time, I left the faith over the next few years. And when I was on the team, a really important aspect of this and of my life is I met my fiance, Amber Lynn. She was the public affairs officer for the team. And we were really good friends on the team. And then after I left the team before her by about 1.5 years. But, we kept in touch and became friends, became closer, started dating. And obviously we were supposed to get married in May, but, thank you, COVID. Thank you, 2020. We went ahead and had to push that back too. So, really looking forward to being able to do that soon. But Amber Lynn has been really, just a great life partner for me and inspiration to me, but really helps me in this journey. One of the most interesting things about our story is that we both started gravitating towards Judaism at the same time on independent tracks. And I think the time I realized it was we were in DC and at our last duty stations, and she asked if I could help find a rabbi for her to talk to. And it was just this moment where I was like, you're looking too? And we found
she also
rabbi
from a Protestant background, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So we were both searching and both trying to figure out what this looks like. And I got in touch with Rabbi Randy Brown, who is, I think many people here know. And he helped us each walk through it in our own ways. Amber Lynn more so. I was a little bit behind her on the journey. But, that was kind of the start of it. And that's how it started, was just this questioning and this inability to accept without questioning and without challenging and without introspection and reevaluation the way things had always been.
Yeah. A lot of people, I, as you know, have been running for the last 8.5 years, the Miller Introduction to Judaism program at AJU, which is the biggest program in North America helping people to go through that conversion process. And one of the questions that I get asked all the time is, are all of your students converting for somebody, right? Are all of them, the Jewish boy, the non-Jewish girl, or vice versa? And I say you would be amazed at the diversity of stories. And there are actually many couples like you and Amberlynn, not many couples like specifically you and Amberlynn, but many couples who are going on this journey together. So you found your way to Rabbi Brown in DC. Walk us through how you became Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting journey, and I mean, for Amberlynn and I to come together at that same moment, just a year and 2 weeks ago was when we entered the mikveh at AJU, and that's how the story ends. Backtracking from there, it's really hard to understand how it happened. But, I got out of the Marine Corps. I went to Stanford Business School. The questioning and the struggling continued, and I kept getting more and more drawn to Judaism, as Amberlynn did as well. And we kind of supported each other through that journey. And then she got out of the Navy. Her father passed away, and it was just a really, really hard time. And around that time, when everything was super hard, was when we found this program. And it sounds it's really hard to explain how important it was at that moment, because as an outsider, I can count on 2 fingers the amount of Jews I knew growing up and going through a career. Randy Brown was a contract rabbi chaplain support for the military, because there are just very few in the military, very few of us. It's dominated by very traditional types of people that come from places you would expect, and especially in the Marine Corps. So we just had zero exposure. So you have no idea how to get in. You don't know if you're going to be doing something wrong accidentally. You don't, there's like thousands of years of tradition, and you have so much to catch up on. You didn't go to school growing up in it. You don't know any of the language at all. You don't know how the service goes. I knew the scriptures generally. I know them well in English, but I know that there's a ton of nuance beyond that. So it's very intimidating. But the Miller program was so special because it gave a very gentle door, a very clear and very simple and very non-threatening path to walk. And I mean, you did a great job guiding us through it. And this is a very special place and program for us because, so Amberlynn was here in Santa Monica because she's getting her PhD at Annenberg. And so she was in Santa Monica. I was finishing up. My first job was in San Francisco. So we did the Sunday class, and every weekend I commuted down to Bel Air, to the Vermilion campus, and took the class, and we took it together. And it was a lot of work and a lot of commitment, but it was worth it. And it was so necessary because we have so much catching up to do, and we needed a place where we could be accepted for where we were. And this was it. This was the only, even to this day, it's the only program like it that we've found.
And why Judaism, Mike? Now looking back a year after the mikveh, it started with questions and an embrace of questions. Why is this where you and your fiance belong?
I can speak for myself. You need to ask her for why it fits for her.
We'll have her on afterward. You're only right. She's
That's
really
right. She's the real show.
Yeah.
You think my resume is great. Hers is way cooler. It ends with the White House during her military career. So for me, authenticity means so much to me. And I don't know if you mean to. I don't know if this community means to. And I don't know if we mean to. But we are irresistibly authentic. We cannot be inauthentic. And I needed that so much. It was an acceptance without being trite. It wasn't pretending to be something it wasn't. We are who we are. And we're struggling. We struggle throughout the millennia, through all ages, through all years, and we continue to struggle and understand what this journey means in a ton of different circumstances. Just how do you hold high holidays during COVID? Has something like this happened before? Sure. There have been pandemics, but what does it look like now when you have to connect through a device? What does, what does Jewish look like in this world as it's changing every day? And I love being a part of that conversation, and being in a community that is struggling through it as well.
Questions and authenticity. Those are two really good and big and important words. There are a few people asking in the chat, and I know this is personal, so up to you if you would like to respond, but everybody's curious about how families respond to these sorts of identity evolutions. And I'm curious if you can talk about what it was like to come out to your family as Jewish.
Yeah, I mean, I had, it wasn't super great. It wasn't bad. I had a conversation with my mom over the phone, and she was worried and didn't understand it, and worried that I, wasn't going to be saved anymore, and all of the standard things, which I mean comes from a good place, but it's just something we don't talk about now. It's and that's fine, because for me this has been a reawakening, and this has enabled me to recommit to God and to faith and to furthering my own journey. And I think at the end of the day, she appreciates that, and my family appreciates that, but it's just hard for them to understand. They did their own journey, it looked their way, and I think parents always hope that their kid's journey looks like theirs, but it never does.
Yeah. Well, it seems like another theme in your life is sacrifice, right? You could have gone an easier direction than 14 years in the service of your country. You could have gone an easier direction than 130-degree days in Afghanistan, though you can get those in Calabasas now.
That's right.
And you could have gone an easier direction in not asking those questions that were chipping away at you and just pushing them down, and facing the tension that means for your family, and the fact that you are willing to step up courageously and make the sacrifices to live the life that you're meant to live is one of the many reasons that I admire you. I'm wondering, for the more than 300 people who are participants here, probably most of whom, though not all of whom, were born Jewish. I'm wondering if there are things that you have discovered as somebody who has joined us now at this point in your life that you may see differently than people who were born Jewish. What are some things that we ought to know that we could learn from you?
I think that one of the things that I bring to this community is a very deep introspection and reevaluation of everything that I grew up with. I think sometimes this community doesn't. I think a lot of people from this community would admit that they're on autopilot and that it's a thing that's familiar, but is not necessarily meaningful. There is a lot of richness and meaning available here. And I think there can be a rediscovery of everything. That's something that I hope through my, not ignorance, but my naivete, walking through service and not understanding why people are talking in service, not knowing when to, bow or all of that. Me rediscovering it, I think, can be an opportunity for somebody to know that there's a uniqueness and a value and something special there. This is something that I and we really wanted to be a part of, and you have it, and you grew up with it, and I wish I had that. And I know that everyone has their own path, and I wouldn't have had it and appreciated it if I didn't walk my path. But I would love to learn, and it's not because I don't appreciate it that I don't know, but it's because I do, and that I want to learn it.
Yeah, there's a tension in the Jewish tradition between the halakha, the Jewish law, that says you're not supposed to ask a convert about their conversion. Once you are a part of the Jewish people, you are as Jewish as anybody else, and we're not supposed to bring it up. And on the other hand, this perspective that you bring that, frankly, the Jewish people needs to hear. and not just from you, but from hundreds of people and thousands of people a year who take this journey. We need the shot in the arm that says there's something really remarkable here. Please don't go through it on autopilot. Please appreciate what you have, and you have a unique position to be able to give us that message. So thank you for that.
Of course.
The last question I want to ask you is we are a couple of days out from the start of a new year, still in those in-between days leading up to Yom Kippur. What's ahead for you, Mike?
That's a great question. And I think it's a great question to ask, especially in this time. So many people are nose down to the grindstone and just living day to day and trying to not lose their minds, working and doing everything from home where all the boundaries blur. I think for Amberlynn and I and myself, we are very much looking forward to finally getting married. It was really sad when we had to move it back. I think it will be for the best, of course. It doesn't change anything, but that's something we're definitely looking forward to. I'm sure that so many people would want to know if we're going to be starting a family, and that's something that we'll have to figure out for our own path. And we will be doing that in the confines of our own relationship, deciding that. I'm
a bit of a yenta, but I wasn't going to ask that.
I was just trying to lead that one up. Yeah. We really, there's so much open ahead of us. Amberlynn's finishing her program, and at the end of that, we will see. And I think one of the great things is that we have the whole world in front of us to choose from. And, we have a passion for taking care of people and pulling up people behind us, because it was really hard to do this journey. She has her own story about why it was hard. It was hard for me to get where I am. And we have a passion to reach back and pull people up behind us. And that includes in the Jewish faith, in the tradition. To find a way to reach back and pull up the next generation onto this path.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. I was going to wrap it right there. Can I just ask very quickly, because I see it in a few people in the chat, and it dovetails so nicely with what you said. A few people are asking about how we as Jews can be more supportive to our troops. And you talk about how to lift up the Jewish community. Are there things that we should know from you as a vet about how we can be supportive of people in service?
I think just asking the question is already such a great start. I would ask that you go beyond a thank you for your service. It's meaningful, and I think that's great, and everyone really appreciates that, but there's so much behind that. And don't assume that you know what it looked like to serve by what you see in movies and shows. It was far different. It was far different in ways that you couldn't imagine. And it's not to put ourselves on a pedestal, because it's not. We did a job we were asked to do. You get something out of it. You're part of a community and part of an organization. But there are weird things that are asked of you, and there's weird experiences and hard experiences. And I think just asking someone to tell their story is the most meaningful thing that you can ask of a veteran.
Well, thank you for taking your time to tell your story today.
Of course.
All right, I'm going to pass it back to Deb to wrap us up.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Adam. Just thank you for guiding this conversation, Mike. Thank you so much. I will say again, thank you for your service. My father-in-law is a retired chaplain from the Air Force, so I have a special connection. And he also taught for Miller Intro to Judaism, so he's connected with all of us as well. So thank you both so much for this just beautiful story on so many levels, so inspirational. It will definitely encourage me to look at what I do just on autopilot and what I need to put more reflection onto and more thought. So thank you for that. That's a beautiful gift to give me, especially right before Yom Kippur. So I really do appreciate that. Thank you to our audience for being with us today. We are so thrilled you joined us. I want to wish everybody a healthy and happy new year. Stay safe, everyone. And again, have a beautiful day. And thank you for joining American Jewish University and B'Yachad together. Bye-bye, everybody.